This is Phase 3 Reflections and Susan Simpson.
Okay, folks, we bring you to a live breaking news story where a local teacher has been seen flying in what appears to be a Supergirl costume. Excuse me, miss, why are you flying?
I just learned how to analyze data, and it makes me feel like Superwoman. Okay, so I apologize for the cheesy intro, but what I wanted to stress is that when you know how to use and look at data the right way, it can be liberating. Through my group experience with Tiffany and Jocelyn, I learned a couple of things. First of all, yes, knowing how to look at data the right way can be liberating, but the process is very difficult. So it was really nice in this assignment to have the opportunity to work with two experienced professionals. Through our conversations, we were able to learn a lot from each other. I think our greatest moment was when we were, and granted was during Hurricane Sandy, we were able to come up with different protocols to use to talk through data. This made a lot of sense to me because I know from my experience at my own school that a lot of times when you come to the table with data, the conversation begins about what do we want to do to help these kids, and sometimes it's just kind of like a Band-Aid fix. We come up with an intervention, that's that, and that's the last time we look at it. But when you have specific protocols to look at data, it requires you to come back to it, and I think that's one of the most important parts. Okay, so like I said before, analyzing data is not easy. It's hard. It's looking at a very complex puzzle and trying to put all the pieces together. So I think my weakest moment through this process is having to look at data in a way I really hadn't before. I know that in previous school, I'm working at a new school this year, but in my previous school, we had a very kind of strict regimen for looking at data, and it involved a process of looking at the student data, looking at trends, kind of like we've already done, and then having to just from a list of interventions pick out an intervention that would have to work for our students. But I call this my weakest moment, but it's also a moment of learning because we learn from our mistakes. I learned through this process that you can't just pick one intervention for a kid because it works for somebody else. Truly analyzing data and coming up with interventions involves thinking about the child, the population of your kids, what has worked for maybe a similar population, but also taking into account things like the child's interests, their family background, their attendance. All those things are really important pieces to the puzzle. So I think it was challenging for me to acquire that skill, and that's why I call it a weakness, but thankfully Jocelyn and Tiffany were there to help me. I think the biggest challenge in working on the Phase 2 project was working with my team to really develop initiatives that clearly matched learning objectives. And that was hard for us when we found trends such as attendance. Based on our research, we know that attendance does have a significant correlation with the success of students. But being able to extract clear trends from the data and to match that with specific learning objectives was truly challenging. We had some really intense conversations about how to do that. And I think if we were to do this project over again, we would pick an initiative that more clearly matched with the trends that related to the students, well, both the students and the learning objectives. So I'm very excited to take back my learning from Phase 2 and overall from this course back to my school. I have a great opportunity because this year I'm at a new school. At my old school, we really already had in place a fairly strict regimen of data analysis where we would monthly go back and look at data, we would analyze it, and kind of like I talked to before, try to do the Band-Aid fix. At my new school, there really isn't a regimen or a protocol already in place for looking at data. So as team leader this year, I'm very excited to bring some data protocols back to my team where I can use some of the skills that we read about and that I've practiced with my team to my school and to my 4th and 5th grade team of teachers. For next year's or next semester's 615 students, I have a few words of advice. First of all, never feel like you're too far ahead. Tiffany and Jocelyn and I, in the beginning, felt like we were way ahead of the game. But planning is super important, and it was so helpful that Dr. Khalsa provided a template for the group to add what they were working on, what week, with due dates. Just make sure you plan ahead so that in the end, you're not feeling overwhelmed. Also, meeting with your group is absolutely positively necessary, and the more, the better. I think if our team was, and our team met once or twice a week at least, but I think if we were to do this whole process over again, we would probably meet more in the beginning to get some more of the groundwork down, because we ended up doing most of our meetings towards the end of the process. Also, for future projects, it would be really helpful to have an assignment where we're looking at our own student data before. I know that there are some students that are not teachers, so they don't have that opportunity, but it would be totally worthwhile to be able to look and analyze our own data or have an assignment where we're doing that so we can have true application. And that's all.
Every teacher that I've ever met strives to be super teacher every day of every week. We come to school early, we stay late, we do whatever it takes to help our kids, our students, to achieve. It is essential that teachers not only have the motivation, but the knowledge and skills to help their kids to achieve everything that they set their mind to. After completing Phase 2, I feel one step closer on my quest to be super teacher. I have developed a skill set that I can bring back to my school as a teacher and a leader. I'm thankful for that.